Austin, letting you know the meeting is being recorded. I do love for these sessions to be more of a conversation. So I've got 3 screens in front of me. It's like Keanu Reeves with the Matrix, just a little bit. But if you've got comments, questions, things throughout, I am the only representative tonight here from Dyslexia Center of Austin, but I will be monitoring that chat. Or again, feel free to come off and unmute at any point, jumping in, and we will get those questions or those ideas shared out from everybody. And we've got lots of colleagues trickling over. Welcome, welcome. Come on in. So here with Dyslexia Center of Austin, we are a local nonprofit organization, and our mission is to provide education, services, and support for individuals with dyslexia and other language-based reading and writing differences and difficulties. We're really trying to get our community invested in empowering those individuals. But as I've said, while we, yes, are located in that central Texas area, that Austin, Texas piece, we have worked with educators all across the great state of Texas and really all across the country. We have some work coming up with a school out in Seattle. We have been working with a couple of teachers actually out in Virginia, Pennsylvania. A few weeks ago, I hosted a build training with some educators from Alabama. So we are everywhere. And I myself am in that New Orleans, Louisiana area currently. So really, no matter where you are coming to us from, so many of you guys have dropped that in the chat. Our goal is to do everything possible to help you find those resources, to host training opportunities, and to make sure we are getting every single child reading. All right, it seems like everybody's getting situated. Welcome in from the Zoom waiting room. So with all of that being said, our goal really is to give all children the key to literacy, because that key is going to change the trajectory of their lives. And we here at Dyslexia Center of Austin, sometimes we do that acronym of DCA, but we do that through multimodal structured language training for teachers and therapists. We provide comprehensive reduced rate evaluations whenever possible for dyslexia and other learning differences. We also will host no-cost dyslexia therapy to students in unserved communities. And we provide that dyslexia awareness piece through resources and community outreach. We do have one other summer workshop series coming up on August 4th. You may have seen a little ad about it, but just to drop a line here, it will be hosted by one of our QIs in training. She's also one of our educational diagnosticians. Her name is Katie McEwen, and that one is coming up on August 4th. It is going to be all about decoding dyslexia from reports to results. So it's really going to be all about analyzing evaluation results and creating actionable strategies from there. Now, this is geared towards mostly our educators and those looking at reports and needing to make those decisions in regards to next steps. And that one is going to cost $35 though, because you will get that ALTA CEU credit. Oh, excellent. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself just a little bit further since we have so many colleagues coming in. As you can see here, my name on the screen, as well as my name in our Zoom participant window, is Lindsay Clark. It is a pleasure to be with you all tonight. Again, I'm so excited to see so many names and faces that I recognize, but so many new ones
I'm looking
as
to see
well.
who's on it. Shannon Greenwald's on it.
Hey, Kelly, welcome in. And so I've gotten a question in the chat from one of our colleagues saying, well, what are all those letters after your name and what do they all mean, right? And what are those differences? And so I am an MED, LDT, CELT, CSLDS. So I have a master's in education from the University of Texas at Austin, where I received my master's in curriculum and instruction with a focus on language and literacy studies. From there, I was able to sit for the master reading specialist exam and certified reading teacher. And so that, though, I felt was not enough. I wanted more. I really wanted to make sure that I was providing services to our students with dyslexia. And so I found Dyslexia Center of Austin. And so LDT stands for Licensed Dyslexia Therapist. And that is sort of an add-on after you receive your CELT certification. So CALT stands for Certified Academic Language Therapist, and that is through our national sort of certifying organization, ALTA, A-L-T-A, Academic Language Therapy Association. And then I also have this additional letters, CSLDS, which is from CIRI. So CIRI is something that's really popular. It is nationwide. But it's called Center for Effective Reading Instruction. So it's actually CERI. And a lot of schools on the Northeast would prefer educators, if they're working with teachers or providing training or working with students, to have just an additional credential. CIRI is also sort of backed by the IDA, the International Dyslexia Association. And so we get that K-PERI exam in order to be able to sit and get that CSLDS. So that stands for Certified Structured Language Dyslexia Specialist. So all of those fancy things to say, I just love to get every single child and adult reading and writing. So to that colleague in the chat, I hope that answers that question. And that there was a part two, thinking, okay, well, how does that matter for us educators as we refer out trying to help families? So we here at Dyslexia Center of Austin do our best to make sure we are training everyone that comes through our programming to be that therapy level instructor. There is additional, or really a different sort of certifying piece where you could be a practitioner, a CALP, a Certified Academic Language Practitioner. And you can read more on sort of the differences between the training, and really it's hours of training and clinical hour difference for those two levels of certification. And so if you have some additional questions though about that, I'm happy to help you as you sort of try to find resources for the families that you're working with, making sure they're getting the best of the best possible. So thank you for that excellent question. In addition to all of this, I'm also a mom of two kiddos. Charlie is going into 3rd grade and Eleanor is about to be 4 and heading into pre-kindergarten. I myself am a former kindergarten and 1st grade teacher turned dyslexia therapist. I've been having a private practice in the Austin area for the past 6 years. And I am now working for 2 different organizations as a national presenter, really making sure structured literacy is getting into all of our classrooms. As well as another position I'm hold right now is that I work for a third-party curriculum review company. So also all in that underneath umbrella of literacy, making sure our materials are aligned to structured literacy and science of reading principles. Oh, Candace, that's excellent. She's got another Eleanor. Well, happy almost birthday to her. So we are going to start to get into it, you guys, because we've got to build this bridge and get to the reading brain. So if you will you please take a big, deep breath with me? So we are going to start off with a very, very, hopefully, potential familiar theoretical model to you. This is that simple view of reading, that SVR. This is really one of those theoretical models that is the foundation for really learning the other pieces that go into true reading instruction, allowing our students to achieve true reading comprehension. And so what we are really trying to do here is think about, okay, well, this is going to be the information we need going into the brain, being activated so we can reach that true comprehension. I often like to look at this formula and think of it as baking a cake of comprehension, if you will. I'm trying to think about, okay, well, what are those main ingredients that I am going to need to bake this cake? And so we've got that word recognition piece. And the big takeaway here is that it must be multiplied by language comprehension to equal skilled reading. Now, when I was going through training almost a decade ago, I had seen this for the first time, but the person who was presenting it actually presented it incorrectly, and they placed a plus sign, that addition sign. Well, that is not going to give us the same results. We are really aiming for a 1 in word recognition multiplied by a solid 1 in language comprehension to equal that skilled reading. But when we think about those things, it's kind of like saying, oh, well, here are the wet ingredients and here are the dry ingredients. And so what is it exactly? I want specific names, especially if I'm a parent at home trying to figure out, well, where are my child's strengths and what are those areas that I can really be trying to make sure we're providing support for? And so here's that other theoretical model. This is Hollis Scarborough's reading rope. And really, this is expanding on that SVR model we just saw on the last slide. I like to say that this is a beautiful visual metaphor that brings that SVR to life. And again, is really giving us the specific names of those ingredients for baking that cake of comprehension. We need both happening at the same time, but it does take time and it takes the right type of instruction to strengthen each of these strands. But this is what we are wanting for all of our readers. We are really wanting to make sure that we are thinking about reading in this bottom-up approach. And you'll hear me say that a few other times this evening, but we really want to think about these two skills. When we think about word recognition, what are those skills? What are those things we want our students to be able to do? Well, we want them to have strong phonological awareness. We want that to start to develop into decoding, this blending and segmenting of at least 3 to 4 sounds in a word. And then sight recognition, when we hear that term sight recognition, I was actually on the phone yesterday with a parent who was talking with me about sort of a product that you can buy at Target. You can also buy it online. It's very, very popular. And they have come out with a reading kit for parents to use at home. And they were telling me about their 5-year-old child and that they were going through these sight words, but that their child was not memorizing these words. And so we had a great conversation about how sight words, let's go ahead and kind of put that term off to the side here. And I want us to start to think about sight recognition. Yes, there are going to be high frequency words that we want all of our students to be able to read as by the speed of sight. But it does take some time to develop that. And we're really never memorizing words. We are orthographically mapping them. And so that is another sort of buzz term, if you will, orthographically mapping. But even with high frequency words, even with irregularly spelled words, we are always trying to link sound and symbol, building out that ownership of the word. And so sight recognition is really any word, a one-syllable word, a multisyllabic word, an irregularly spelled word, but it is really any word you no longer have to laboriously decode. And so with word recognition, those are things as educators and really as parents too, we can be checking in on because we can teach those pieces to mastery. It is a yes or a no if our students, our children have that. And so we are trying to get those skills to be increasingly automatic. So we want those things accurate and automatic. The other skills that we are going to see and the other pieces that are going to be happening in the brain. So again, all of this is getting sort of digested in that brain. So we can reach that skilled reading, reach that comprehension. But with language comprehension, the sky's the limit. There's only so many different concepts we can introduce to our children at a given moment in a given school year. Only so many vocabulary words they will come in contact with through a particular story or through a particular unit. And so our goal with developing those language comprehension skills is to make sure that these strands are becoming increasingly strategic. So we have a couple of pieces here that we want to pause and reflect on. Our kindergarten through 2nd grade curriculum tends to have a heavy focus on developing those word recognition skills. But there's still this dash of language comprehension. And again, we need both word recognition multiplied by language comprehension. It is in that 3rd grade window where curriculum and what we're trying to get students to do usually makes this shift, where our instructional minutes are not so much focused on those word recognition pieces anymore, and we're doing more of the strategy development in 3rd grade and beyond. A lot of times this is where our students with dyslexia will get identified because they are having such a hard time making that jump in the curriculum because they are still sort of at step 1, word recognition. We'll see that independent reading piece starting to pick up even more in those upper grades as well. And so while that we do encourage early intervention, earlier the better, we do typically see where a lot of students are identified in that window. With Take Flight being one of our courses that we train and one of the main piece of our CALC dyslexia therapy training program geared towards 2nd and 3rd grade children, just because there is such a large number identified in that window. And so these are all the things that we're hoping are going to be going into that brain, right? Well, we just talked about the simple view of reading. It seems really simple, doesn't it? Like, oh yeah, just put all these things in the brain. Let's do it. The brain can do all these things. It can handle all of these things. Well, again, let's take that big, deep breath. Are you ready? Because it's not so simple.
Why don't you sign up for this? It's free.
Yes, and you know, on my end, I've got a colleague ask if I can mute everyone. It appears that everyone is muted on my end. So let's see. So if you are, we're just having a little background noise. So I appreciate that colleague letting me know. Hopefully that will sort of cancel out the noise. Thank you. I think they were able to either turn it off or go ahead and fix it. Thank you. All right, you guys. So here we are. We've been really sort of getting our feet wet. Some of you might be super familiar with that simple view of reading with this reading rote model. But we're going to zoom out of those theoretical models for just a moment and start to really shift to that reading brain. And so there are a few pieces we want to make sure we are all on the same page about. And that is that reading is not a natural process. We are actually not born to read. We are born to communicate. We're really born to get into this oral language. So we will talk a little bit about oral language development. Research does show clearly, though, that 95% of all students are cognitively capable of learning to read when they receive instruction that is aligned with science of reading. We also know from fMRI technology that our students with dyslexia end up having less activity in the left hemisphere. And in certain other specific areas of the brain, where we'll see some additional activation is in the right hemisphere, where they're really trying to compensate. And so a big takeaway here is that language is happening in the left hemisphere. So go ahead, you can locate that left hemisphere. Now, while we do know from that fMRI technology that they are going to have less activity in that left hemisphere if they're getting identified with dyslexia, the good news here is that our brains are plastic. When we learn to read, we're actually engaging in something called neuronal recycling. And so another person that you'll hear me talk about tonight is Stanislaus Dehaene. So he is a researcher that I've pulled a lot of great resources from, and someone that I encourage you guys to watch his YouTube videos, etc. So here we are. If you are looking at this image of the brain, we're really going to start to call this the reading brain, if you will. And this is all happening in that left hemisphere. So I'm going to point out just a few key components that we are trying to get online and talk to you a little bit about how we activate those. So if we are looking at this and thinking it is that left hemisphere, we've got the frontal lobe. This is going to be that front left area. Sometimes this is referred to as Broca's area. This is the phonological processor. This is where our sounds, our pronunciation, and our articulation live. So we have all of our sound knowledge in this front left hemisphere. When we are born, right, we come out of the womb, what do? Well, we are cooing, we are crying, we are babbling, and we are starting to develop that oral language from birth. And so that front left of the brain is getting lots of information early on. We also will use that part of the brain for sound manipulation. So if you were to ask a student, if you were to say, okay, say cat, and they say cat, now say cat without, what are you left with? And they've got to say at. Well, that part of the brain they're using is this front left, this Broca's area. Now I'm going to jump to the back left for just a moment here. You are going to see this little gray bubble called the letter box. And we have these initials in here, VWFA, or really it's an acronym for visual word form area. Now that is a term that's been coined by Stanislaus Dehaene. And it sort of overlaps the occipital lobe and the temporal lobe. The occipital lobe is primarily responsible for processing vision. What is so interesting about the work that Stanislaus and other neuroscientists have been kind of engaging with is that this letterbox is always in the same area for everyone. Despite our different writing systems, whether you're using an alphabetic writing system or a logographic writing system, or if there's other types of characters that you are using, all humans use similar brain areas to read. And so when you start to hear about, oh, dyslexia, oh, that's only an English language thing. Dyslexia exists across the world, no matter what language. What's also interesting about this VWFA area is that this is that where it is very sensitive to our known alphabets, so that we here, if we are learning how to read and speak and write in English, then that part of our brain is going to light up. Well, guess what? If you are learning to read and write in another language as well, same thing, same parts of the brain are going to start to activate. We are also in this VWFA area recycling those neurons that we used to use for processing faces. So this occipital lobe, this whole back portion of the brain, it really is your right and left hemisphere. This is where you process vision. But in his book, Reading in the Brain, he goes through sort of this example of how when we see an object from far away, no matter which direction it's in, you know, a squirrel, if we're hunter-gatherer days, you know, if we're looking and we're trying to hunt that squirrel, no matter which direction that squirrel is in, a squirrel is a squirrel is a squirrel is a squirrel. Well, that is all that is stored in the back portion of our brain, that occipital lobe, where our vision is processed. But I want you to think about the letter P for just a moment. When we look at the letter P, well, oh my gosh, a P, right? Well, isn't it like this? A P is a P is a P is a P? No, when we start to learn those letters, right? Directionality matters. And so this is actually something he talks about as mirror invariance. And we're having to unlearn mirror invariance when we learn the alphabet. Because all of a sudden, a P is not a P is not a P is not a P. If you turn it upside down and all around, then it becomes a B, it becomes a D, could even become a Q, depending on the font you're using, right? And so lots of interesting things happening in that visual word form area. Now, this is what I want you to think about, though. Reading is not natural. We've got the front left of the brain activating with sounds. Eventually, we get that back left of the brain where we start to store all of our letters. So all 26 English alphabet letters, as well as all of those variety of letter patterns, things like TH, SH, TCH, etc. So all of that gets stored in that back left of the brain. But those two parts of the brain live separately until we build this bridge of understanding. And so we as parents, we as educators, we are trying to connect that front left of the brain with the back left of the brain. Now, there is one more area that is not going to pop up on our slideshow, but I'm going to draw it in for us. And I'm going to kind of draw it as an overlapping shape right here in sort of a pink color. We call this that parieto-temporal lobe area, since it is overlapping. And a lot of times this area is called the phoneme-grapheme association area. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in for you guys. Phoneme-grapheme association area. And that is really the third piece of the brain that we are trying to activate in our teaching, in our instruction. And this actually goes for any single child. Again, reading is not natural. We're trying to get this brain up and running. And so we are really trying to build this bridge of reading for word recognition from the front left to the back left. Now, again, this is for that word recognition. But what about language comprehension, right? That's another piece of that simple view of reading. Well, there are lots of great pieces that will tell us that our meaning, our understanding, our comprehension will get activated down here, closer to that temporal lobe. And so lots of pieces of the brain, but the three main regions that are going to be responsible for truly word recognition, the reading of the word, will be Broca's area in the front left, that letter box, that VWFA in the back left, and getting this phoneme-grapheme area online. Now, many of you have had presentations with me before, And so if you already know it, you can feel free to unmute and chime in, or you can drop it in the chat. You can go ahead and get your fingers ready. But that's a lot of science-y terms, right? And I'll hear a lot from educators. That reading brain stuff, that belongs on doctor's office walls. But what are we working on every single day as an educator, as a dyslexia therapist, as a parent? We are working on the hearts, but we are working on the brain. And so I came up with this kind of silly analogy. It sort of reminds me of my dad. My dad is really the reason I got into working with students that have dyslexia. You may have heard me tell this story before, but when I was in the first grade, I got to go to the grocery store with my dad. And that was the first time I ever realized he had dyslexia, because my mom had sent me to the grocery store with him to read the grocery list. And so that was a very big eye-opening experience for me as a young child. And so I've really sort of lived growing in my understanding of what that really means and how does that impact, especially our adults. And so that reading brain, lots of science terminology. How can I remember it? Well, I like to say, because my dad had this hairstyle in the 80s and it's still kind of popular today, but he had that hairstyle, the mullet. And there is a funny, funny little saying that goes along with the mullet. Does anybody know it?
Sounds in the front, ladders in the back.
Yes, Elizabeth, you're on my next level. We've got Candace. Yes, Janelle, Lane. Thank you, Jacqueline. Yeah, you guys. So there's this funny little saying that says it's business in the front, party in the back. And you guys, that is really what the reading brain is all about. It is business in the front, party in the back. We've got to get every single student to that party in the back left of the brain. Our students with dyslexia are going to need maybe even a bigger invitation, more of that invite. And so we have got to make sure that they're getting that invitation to that party in the back left of the brain. And so I tweak that language. Elizabeth has been with me now a few times where I'll say, instead of business in the front, which is your oral language, right? That's what we're being born with, right? Oral language. But we've got to start to connect it all to that back left of the brain. And so I like to say it's sounds in the front, letters in the back. And so every single day when I was in my classroom as a K-1 teacher, in that role as a dyslexia therapist, and even now as a mom of 2 young children, I am constantly asking myself 2 things. How am I moving this child from speech to print? And so that is an ode to Louisa Moat. She has an amazing book called Speech to Print. So how am I moving this child from that oral language to the printed word? And then how am I connecting the sounds in the front to the letters in the back? Now, I am going to share with you just another theoretical model, but it really is something that's beautiful about all of these sciencey pieces, right? These theoretical models, is that it's really just a different way of looking at the reading brain. It's a different way of looking at sort of the same information. And so sometimes one of these theoretical models will jive with you more so than the other, but it's still getting us to that same place. Here, you're going to see some slightly sophisticated up-leveled language where we have that front left right in here. We're going to call it the phonological processor. So that is still your sounds in the front, your pronunciation, your articulation. If we jump to that back left of the brain, this is that VWFA, that visual word form area. Here, we're going to call it your orthographic processor. So when you hear that fancy word, orthography or orthographic, think written word, the printed word on the page, the letters, right? And so again, we've got to connect the sounds in the front, in this case, the phonological processor, to the letters in the back, the orthographic processor. How do we do that? Well, we're going to share a little bit more about instruction and intervention that is evidence-based, and sort of what components can you be looking for when you are maybe opening up that manual for the first time, if you're an educator, or if you are a decision maker for your school, or if you're a parent trying to figure out, is this program, if I'm hiring a dyslexia therapist, or if you're going to hire out someone that's a tutor, what are they using? Hopefully you'll be really armed with knowledge and information, and you're going to be looking for some keywords here. From there, though, you're going to flip through the pages and make sure they're actually doing what they say they're doing. And if you ever need help with that, call me up, email me, and I will help you leaf through that and make sure it is actually going to do what it says it's going to do. But we have to get this reading brain. And really, I call it this bridge, this reading bridge connected. We do that by activating the sounds in the front. So our kindergarten teachers today, you might say, okay, students, today we're going to learn about the sound. Everybody say that sound with me. And they do. They all say, when you do that, you are activating the sounds in the front. You're getting that left frontal lobe going. All right. We're firing up. We're warming up. Then chances are that kindergarten teacher is going to show them the letter. Maybe they have a flashcard. Maybe they write it on the board. The minute you do that, and the teacher says, this is the letter P. P makes the sound. You are starting to fire those neurons and wire them together. So that's another phrase that I live by, is neurons that fire together, wire together. We have to remember that this reading brain, right, for everybody must be explicitly and directly taught into. We are building the bridge of reading. Sometimes people will call it the superhighway of phonics. Whatever language it is, we must build that bridge. We have to connect the front left and the back left. Now, what you're going to see when those neurons start to activate is we start to get some good party in this middle portion. This, you guys, this bridge that you're building, this connection is really called the angular gyrus. This is helping associate sound and symbol or sound and letter. But this green square is what I called earlier the phoneme-grapheme association area. We know that with our experienced readers, our skilled readers, that if we were to stick them through an fMRI machine, they're going to have more blood flow in this back left region. So I'm sort of circling in this lavender color, but they're going to have more activation in this back left section of the brain. Our students with dyslexia tend to have more activation in that front left or in that right hemisphere where they are kind of overcompensating, saying, I know this is supposed to make sense. Help me make it make sense. And so they're using other parts of their brain to make it make sense. And just so we can connect it all together, that is that bridge for word recognition. But you guys, that simple view of reading tells us it's word recognition multiplied by language comprehension. So where is that on here? Well, that language comprehension, the processor that Seidenberg and McClellan are talking about, is going to be this sort of blue oval. And I pointed that out to us earlier in that temporal lobe. But this is where our context and our meaning processors are located. So that is going to be your definitions, your background knowledge, your knowledge of sentence structure. So all of those pieces sort of live in that area there. Now, some other big highlights, but first things first, I want you to take another big deep breath. Are you ready? Let me know if you've got other comments, questions, anything at all. Because this brain science stuff, it can get a little heavy. But trekking right along here, as I mentioned, Stanislaus Dehaene, one of my all-time favorite researchers. He's got amazing YouTube videos. So you can plug his name in there, videos of his presentations. And he's got really two books that stand out in my mind that I use as go-to resources, and that is Reading in the Brain, as well as How We Learn. So if you haven't read those before, I encourage you to try to pick them up. They can be a little dense, lots of information, but lots of great information. So just like our students, just like our children, and in everything and anything we learn, we have to go slow to go fast. So give yourself that grace if you're diving into a book with maybe an unfamiliar topic, but go slow to go fast. Now, what he has done, though, Stanislaus has done some amazing, amazing things. And here what we're seeing is a slide from one of his previous presentations where we think about that oral language piece. Oral language is that foundation for the rest of someone's literacy life. And we often don't think of babies, right, as readers, yet here we are laying the foundation with oral language from birth. Another amazing resource that I often utilize is ASHA. It stands for, it is ASHA, and it is the American Speech Language Hearing Association. And again, they've been a great resource for me in growing my own understanding in regards to how oral language develops, as well as the benchmarks we can be sort of expecting in our children to reach at certain ages. And so just a brief little summary, I mentioned earlier, 0 to 3 months, we have got babies that are cooing and crying. So they're already starting to make sounds. 4 to 6 months old, they are babbling. Sometimes we like to say that they're forming those frontal sounds right in the front of your mouth. Things like b, and we wonder why they're doing that. Well, as an infant, their vision is still developing. But if you are that caregiver at home, if you are their mom, chances are you are holding that baby and you are in that baby's face saying, mama, mama. And so what are they seeing and what are they hearing? So we are already starting to develop like, oh, wow, watch my mouth. Look at my mouth. So that pronunciation and articulation piece starting to develop there. From 7 months to 12 months, they are really starting to imitate our speech sounds. We may even see little infants, little children, able to start to say sort of those, I call them double syllable words, mama, dada, bye, bye. From 1 year to 2 years old, they start to develop that sentence level already where they're saying 2-word sentences. They might not be grammatically correct, but 2-word sentences trying to communicate. From 2 to 3 years old, we sort of expand on that 2 to 3 words together, and they're easily understood by their caregivers. So that age of 2 to 3 years old. From 3 to 4 years old, we're going to level things up where we are really engaging in simple sentences with 3 to 4 words, maybe even more. And in this case, though, 3 to 4 years old, they are starting to become easily more understood by others out in their environment. And so we've really run into that with our own daughter, Eleanor, where from 2 to 3 years old, she would say all kinds of things, but she sort of sounds like a minion if you're familiar with those Despicable Me movies. But we understand her and it's great. But now she's almost 4 years old and we've really watched that oral language develop. And now she is easily understood by so many people, which is a good thing and a bad thing all at the same time. She's got a lot to say. From there, though, 4 to 5 years old, you guys, they actually, by 4 to 5 years old, have a pretty clear voice. They're able to stay on topic with you. And most of their speech sounds have been correctly formed. Most, not all. And so if we are seeing challenges in oral language development, that is a first potential red flag that something's going on for them. So I always encourage you, if you've got that inkling of like, oh man, we've got some sounds that we're struggling with, or we're not forming those sentences yet, or we're having a really hard time with certain pieces of our language, of being able to engage in that conversation or communicate those basic needs, to just be aware. Be aware, and if and when you feel necessary, try to seek out a speech and language pathologist. If you've got SLPs on your school campus, they are such a gift. Utilize them as a resource. If not, go find some friends. Go find some friends who are SLPs and hang out with them. Those are my favorite kinds of people besides dyslexia therapists. So even in those little baby brains, we are starting to develop our reading brain. Now, zooming in a little bit further on this VWFA, that visual word form area, I do like to give you sort of a rough estimate on where that is in the brain. And so I'm actually going to hit stop share on my slideshow for just a moment. You can humor me here for just a second, but we've got language happening in the left hemisphere. I want you to go ahead and make a hang 10. We're going surfing today. What I want you to do is find that left hemisphere, and on that frontal lobe, place your pinky. And you can tell yourself, sounds in the front, right? That's your sounds in the front, right there, that frontal lobe, Broca's area. Pronunciation, articulation. But then when you place that thumb, it's going to go roughly behind your ear towards that back. And that is your letters in the back. That is that visual word form area roughly. And so that is sort of where it is. And again, that gets activated and is pretty much in the same place for everyone, which is really pretty cool. Now, if you really want to extend that hang 10 though, you've got your sounds in the front, so pinky on the front left, thumb reaching all the way to the back. I encourage you now to stick out that index finger. You're going to make it I love you, right? Because we love ourselves, we love our brains, we love our children, we love our students. But that index finger is really also sort of pinpointing where that phoneme grapheme association area is, where I was talking with you earlier. So that parieto-temporal overlap. We also have this sensory motor strip that's kind of like a headband in that area as well. So we're going to talk about the importance of that sensory motor strip as well. Other pieces in regards to why this VWFA, this visual word form area, is just so important. Well, for our individuals with dyslexia, this is what is often showing reduced activation compared to our typical readers. And so that reduced activation is, of course, going to contribute to word reading challenges, which is going to then in turn impact fluency, which then in turn impacts comprehension. Some other really cool things that Stanislaus has shared out. As we mentioned, it is always located in the same place in the brain. It is going to be activated by written words more than other visual stimuli. So it is still located in that occipital lobe in the back left of the brain, really the back left and the back right. That whole back region is occipital lobe processing vision. And so that's where, that rapid automatic naming types of tests, can they rapidly automatically name colors, shapes, those types of things? That is all happening in that back region of the brain. But that VWFA area seems to have a real special spot for the written word, for those letters. It activates to known scripts. So here I want you to think script is symbol. So whatever type of symbol you are using to represent your language. Another new word for me earlier and for maybe you today is something called pure alexia. And so this lesion can cause pure alexia. And so I started to think, oh my goodness, what is that? I don't want people in our meeting this evening to get confused with, oh man, is that a form of dyslexia? No, they are two different things. Pure alexia is a condition where individuals will lose their ability to read, but for some reason, their ability to write remains intact. So it really is a selective reading impairment, and it usually occurs after a brain injury in previously literate adults. This is where we are able to read, or I should say literate individuals, because it could happen, a traumatic brain injury could happen at a young age as well. But essentially, the brain can no longer access that visual information needed to understand the written word, even though other pieces of that language network have been fully preserved. So that is just something for us to keep in mind as well. And super cool, right? It's unconsciously helping us recognize written words, no matter if it's uppercase, lowercase, or a variety of fonts. So a lot of times I'll talk about all the different ways we write letter A, or the way letter A will pop up as you're typing on the computer. Here, just on our screen alone, you can see letter A written tons and tons of different ways. And so let's see if I can pop up that annotation tool to show you a few of those. So here on our slide, if you're looking at that letter A, right? So our final bullet here says unconsciously recognizing written words, no matter the case, the font, the location. But letter A, right, as a lowercase letter could look like this one here, like in our word faces. In our font over off to the side, it could look like this. We have capital letter A's located as well. And so an A is always an A though. That is that importance of letter name. So lots of cool things happening in that VWFA area. Other interesting things shared by Stanislaus is that the reading brain takes off after a few months of school in a neurotypical brain, but our students with dyslexia, they need a little bit more. We know that that brain starts to kind of try to piece the front to the back. but they are going to need more intensive, true, systematic, and cumulative instruction and practice with immediate feedback by a trained individual in order to get all of these pieces online. So here we have a really powerful image where we are seeing those three parts of the brain. So as I mentioned earlier, you'll see here that front, this is all happening in that left hemisphere, front left, that Broca's area getting lit up for our student of we might consider a neurotypical brain. You're seeing that occipitotemporal, that visual word form area getting lit up. And you are seeing that parietotemporal, where I was talking to you about that phoneme grapheme association area. So all three of those lighting up nicely, and you're really seeing that party in the back left of the brain. But our students with dyslexia, boom, it's kind of like a stop sign when you look at that. What we do know is that that dyslexic brain is wired differently, not less intelligently. Dyslexia is neurobiological. It is not behavioral. It is not motivational. It is not caused by poor teaching, laziness, or low intelligence whatsoever. It is truly a brain difference. DeHaan emphasizes that our students with dyslexia will have normal or even above average IQs. Their brains are just going to process written language a little bit differently. And so we have to think, how are we going to get those students? How are we going to activate those neurons in the front so we can start to activate and get those letters in the back, right? The sounds in the front to the letters in the back. A lot of times this is cleaning up that phonological processor. For my dyslexia therapists and my educators on the line today, you guys know no matter what program you're trained in, there's so much emphasis at that sound level, at that phoneme level. And we are seeing lots of great work come out in regards to place and manner of articulation. Where is your tongue, your teeth, your lips? A lot of times that piece of curriculum, right? Or that piece of intervention is getting left out because, oh, they'll figure it out. They'll get to it. No, 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 no. That is super important because we need to make sure we are strengthening the sounds in the front. Our students have to have clear, clean, crisp sound, articulation, pronunciation, living in that front left, so we can properly link it to the letters in the back left. And so think about that sound. How are they doing at that larger sound level? How are we doing with syllables? Are we able to get to the initial sound? How are we then moving into isolating individual sounds in a 2-letter word and a 3-letter word and so on? With those differences for our students with dyslexia, and I look at this, it just feels like a kind of a gut punch when you look at these brain differences. But the beauty of all of this is that we are changing the brain through the right kinds of intervention. There are disruptions in the reading circuit, especially in that left hemisphere of the reading circuit. So a few areas for us to be aware of is that left temporoparietal region. We are also wanting to think about the left occipitotemporal region, especially that visual word form area. So both of those are really these two pieces here that I was discussing with you, that phoneme grapheme association area and that visual word form area. And here in this image, we are not seeing them activate. Phonological processing can be that core deficit, which is why so much of that importance on phonological awareness, building out towards phonemic awareness, is critical so we can be strengthening the sounds in the front. And so that is what we are hoping to do. We are hoping to rewire the brain as non-invasive brain surgeons, right? We are always trying to get that reading brain online. And so this is an image that is coming to us out of Nadine Gabb. And so I want to draw your attention to her name right here. She's coming to us from Harvard University. There's actually been a really important study that was just published in 2025 in June, not just a few weeks ago, in regards to reading skills and struggles manifesting earlier than thought. So that is a Harvard Gazette article. And it is very, very powerful, where we are really able to see, if we were to have those little babies, 18 months old, go through that fMRI machine, we are actually able to start seeing brain differences already in these regions of the brain. So I'm going to also try to see if I can drop that link for the article. We recently shared it through Dyslexia Center of Austin's Facebook. And so if you're looking for that, it's by Nadine Gabb, Harvard Gazette. Very, very interesting article. What Nadine's study back in 2017 that she presented at the Connecticut Dyslexia Conference shared with us is that pre-intervention, you'll see here where we are lighting up that front left of the brain, right? Lighting up the front left, but not so much activation in that back left of the brain. But what is amazing is that post-intervention, we are seeing increased activity in that back left of the brain. Whoever was working with that child got them to the party in the back, that reading party. So what does that look like then? How can we be those non-invasive brain surgeons? What do we need to get the sparks flying, right? We're really to get those neurons firing and wiring together. A lot of times our students that have dyslexia but may be really heavily compensating, maybe they are able to decode those words. But that fluency piece, that struggle for the output, it is there. We tend to say that those students are using backcountry roads. And so no more backcountry roads. We're trying to get them on that main highway of phonics instruction, that main highway of word recognition. There are going to be a few important ingredients. So here we are baking that cake of intervention, baking that cake, helping to rewire the brain. It is going to come down to the knowledge of a human, the knowledge of a true professional, plus the appropriate evidence-based structured literacy curriculum. And we do place this emphasis on evidence-based. We want there to be true evidence that this is going to work. That is going to equal the rewiring of our students' brains. Now, these are some images that we've gotten off of the IDA website, the International Dyslexia Association website. If you are looking for an intervention program, or if you are looking for someone, yes, those letters at the end of the name matter, but what are they using? How often are they going to be meeting with your child? We want to make sure that all 5 essential components are going to be included. And really, this goes for tier 1, their general education classroom teaching as well. We need all of the big 5 present: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. And we need those 5 components taught sort of in this spiral here. It reminds me of sort of a kaleidoscope, if you will. We are looking for that instruction to be systematic and cumulative. It needs to be explicit. Reading, that it's not a guessing game. We are going to explicitly and directly give our students the code, the alphabetic code, linking the sounds in the front to the letters in the back. The more we do that, we know our students with dyslexia, we do that once and you think, oh yeah, neurons that fire together, wire together, right? Well, we have to do that several times. We are building those little pieces time and time again. That repetition, that cumulative piece is critical. And we are diagnostic in our approach. And that sort of brings me back to that Hollis Scarborough reading rope. If you can see me in my tiny box, I've got a pipe cleaner version of our reading rope. I carry this with me pretty much everywhere, even so that my own children are like, Mom, you have that sticking out of your purse, put it away. But I take this with me into my own planning meetings, into coaching meetings, when I'm analyzing curriculum, because I know that these are the things that I want to make sure that I am teaching every single strand. And these are the things that I want to make sure I'm assessing. That way I can be diagnostic. And so if you are someone in the field working with a student, as a teacher, as a dyslexia therapist, a dyslexia specialist, do you feel like you have assessments that are helping you really dive deep into every single strand. If not, let's talk. But we want to do that, and we want to make sure that all of those three pieces are happening and that we are covering the ground here, if you will, this centerpiece. We want to make sure that we are making sure to teach phonology, the sounds of the language. So that emphasis on the sounds in the front. That sound symbol correspondence, linking it with how it sounds, what it looks like, and then getting that handwriting piece. We really need all three of those things happening simultaneously. Syllable level knowledge. There are 6 syllables in our English language, and that can be such a game changer, especially as our students dive into multi-syllabic word reading. Similarly, with morphology, the smallest meaningful units in our English language, things like consonant suffix S. When you have a student that says cat, and then they draw a cat, and then they walk away, and then they come back to you and they drew 3 cats, and they tell that to you, they are using a morpheme. That S means more than one at the end of cat. And so that is at its simplest form. We eventually build out into Latin and Greek morphology. Syntax, that sentence order, really the word order in a sentence, and semantics being our word meaning. And so these are the big things we are aiming to do. In addition, we want to make sure that we are also teaching our children about the reading brain. So I love that in Take Flight, this is an image from our Take Flight intervention program, that we do spend some time going over these parts of the brain with our students. We also discuss with them this sensory motor strip. So that was sort of what I mentioned to you. It's kind of like a headband, very close to that phoneme grapheme association area. But that sensory motor strip is really helping us get the information from the front to the back. And we activate that sensory motor strip, this sort of headband, through multi-sensory instruction. This is our sensory motor. These are the things we are touching, feeling, saying, doing. And so finding ways that connect and letting our students know what we're doing here, the way our activities are aligned, they have a purpose, and we are activating those parts of the brain in the right way. A couple of final quotes here for you. I've mentioned it to you earlier, but we've all got to go slow to go fast. So I know especially all this brain information can be so much to digest, but please don't hesitate to email us, reach out to us, let us know how we can help you build that bridge for your student, build that bridge for you as a dyslexia professional. I also have another motto I live by William Van Cleve that says, you have to know something to learn something. So we all have to start somewhere, and from there, that knowledge will grow. And then our very own Simone Biles tells us practice gives you confidence, and confidence is what empowers you. And so we're not about practice makes perfect. I'm not looking for perfect. I'm looking for progress, and I'm looking for competence. And that is what we are looking for, especially in our students with dyslexia as they grow in their own reading abilities. So you guys take that big deep breath. I know I've got lots of questions popping up, but take that big deep breath. Whew, exhale. It is 7:59 and you are looking fine. But I hope is that you walk away this evening with some really cool things that you learned, something new. And again, trying to establish that foundation, maybe those theoretical models in the beginning, things you are familiar with, but you have to know something to learn something. So hang back if you've got comments or questions, but we hope to see you at our next workshop series, again, with Katie McEwen. It is 8 o'clock now on the dot. If you are needing to leave, you guys are free to go. Let me know if there's anything. I do want to share out. We've got a colleague in the chat. I love this. And I'm the same way. They have written, I've always been confused by the picture with the big red activation of the sound area. So I'm going to pop that back up. If it's a phonological deficit and they need work on PA, why is it that that area is lit up so big? Not sure if that makes sense. No, to that colleague in the chat, it most certainly makes sense. What I want you to think about is that when they are hearing sounds and we are seeing that activation, just because that part of the brain is activating doesn't mean it has anywhere else to go quite yet. And they might be activating the wrong sound. So I want you to think about confusion, place and manner confusion. So for example, we'll hear a lot of and b confusion. I'm trying to think, my own daughter right now, Eleanor, who is about to be 4, I'm hearing a lot of p and b confusion. And so she'll say buzzle instead of puzzle. And so she and I have been working on sort of isolating those two sounds, practicing those two sounds. And so for her though, even though she is confusing those two sounds, that front left of the brain is activating because she's lighting up sounds in the front. When we are getting our students with dyslexia to read, right? When we are sitting there reading with them, they know, okay, this is supposed to make some sounds, but the right sounds might not always be being activated, or it doesn't know where to go or how to map the sound to the symbol. So to that colleague in the chat, I hope that that makes sense. Oh, thank you, Marcy. Thank you, Lane. Yes, and to that colleague in the chat, if you want to talk more, let me know. I'm always happy to jump on a call or jump on another Zoom. And so I want you to think that that phonological processor, it's like, okay, this is sound information. It might not be activating the right sounds though. So that's why we're seeing that big lighting up piece. That is that sort of starting spot. Okay, like I know sounds are supposed to happen. Here we go. Oh, thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Nancy. All right, you guys, and if there is another slide you want me to share, let me know, or something else you want me to talk back through. Thank you, Ashley and Michelle. Oh, thank you, Kelly and Shannon. It's a pleasure to be with you guys tonight. I know we cram in a lot in an hour. Okay, great question. So we've got a colleague in the chat, Jessica, asking, is there a difference in activation between severe and mild dyslexia? I will say this, every brain, while we are seeing a lot of the same parts of the brain activating for reading, it sort of depends on where that deficit is. And so there are some cases of severe dyslexia where you might not see that back left lighting up at all. You might have more milder cases where that back left is lighting up just a little bit, and maybe that student is able to get through and make it all the way to 4th, 5th grade, maybe even high school, before they're starting to realize, wow, my fluency, my comprehension, reading is a massive struggle. But our brains are sort of like fingerprints though as well, where we have lots of similar parts of the brain. All of our brains are different. They are all shaped differently. And that is the goal of dyslexia intervention, is to shape those parts of the reading brain, but making them accessible to that individual child. So Jessica, I hope that answers your question just a little bit. But I would say, thinking back to that reading rope, different, while yes, we are thinking a lot at that word recognition level of difficulty. Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, so Norma, I know that Kelly O'Mullen, our executive director, who I know you know, we are trying to think about ways where there was not a direct handout for our presentation this afternoon, or really this evening. And so she is trying to kind of figure out how we may share out certain pieces from today. That she and I are going to have a conversation about that. So if we are going to give out something, it will come to you guys when we release the video of our recording, which I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Thank you, Jacqueline.